A good day to all of you Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn devotees. I am once more Don151.
I am once again Mekkah.
And you are once again watching my Fire Emblem 10 hard mode 0% gross playthrough. This time, it's part 3 chapter 4. As foreshadowed, Scrimir has brashly gotten himself into trouble, and his right-hand man Ranulf is begging Ike and the Grail mercenaries to bail him out, as usual. This chapter basically integrates the Grail mercenaries with the playable members of the Beast Tribe, and consequently we get 5 new playable units who only become visible in the preparations after we briefly exit the base and then re-enter it. Of these 5 new units, the most notable one is Ranulf himself. So Ranulf is very interesting. He is a cat Laguz with a pretty high level and pretty good base stats. And from what we've experienced thus far in this playthrough, Laguz have played a critical offensive role in many of our strategies. So you'd expect the same from Ranulf. Basically you'd expect him to be like Volug. But we've also experienced the lows of having to deal with Laguz's transformation gauge, and Ranulf takes that drawback to an extreme. So the big difference between cat Laguz and pretty much every other kind of Laguz is that they lose gauge at a slightly faster rate. Every single event that causes them to lose gauge, they lose 1 more point than someone like a tiger, a wolf, a raven, or a hawk. And even though this doesn't seem like very much, it does have a really outsized impact on how many times Ranulf can fight before he runs out of gauge entirely and becomes useless, and therefore how much effort needs to be spent to maintain his gauge and keep it in a range where he's not in danger of untransforming.
For all of his flaws, Ranulf does start out with 30 gauge on this map for plot-related reasons, so he can transform right away. And this is fortunate because he plays an important role in completing the main objective of the chapter. Because of that, he is assigned our 2 best mobility skills, Celerity and Pass. It's not common for a unit to be able to fit both of those onto their skill loadout, as they take 15 capacity each, and that is normally reserved for a specific few Bjork classes promoted to tier 3. But Ranulf can take them because, unlike the bird tribes for example, he doesn't have to reserve 10 capacity to fit Canto. Now the other Laguz that join here range from mostly irrelevance to completely irrelevance. We're rejoined by Mordecai and Lethe. Lethe is completely irrelevant from here on out, you're never going to see her again. Mordecai's still kind of nice because he is heavy enough to shove a couple people, but that's about it. Then we have Lyre, who has just about the worst combat imaginable, even worse than Lethe, and she has all those cat gauge flaws that were previously mentioned, so you can forget about her immediately. Lastly, there's Kai'Sa. If you are one of the few people who deploy him on this map, you'll find his combat rather underwhelming, but he does start with an interesting 17 gauge. No idea what they were thinking there. If you look at the upper left side of your screen, you might have noticed that it says Ike and Ranulf arrive together, so it's effectively a double C's map. Ranulf is going to make it up the left side almost completely unassisted. With these skills, all he needs is a double shove in order to arrive at the same time that Ike does. Ike in the meantime took a comfortable route and just called the only taxi the Grail mercenaries have available in Haar. Haar is fortunately not being weighed down by doing this because he has the Savior skill. He also needs Resolve to fight effectively at the top, and in order to fit both of those skills, he needs to be promoted to tier 3 here.
You can make the argument that Haar doesn't need to be promoted for this chapter strategy. He could probably negotiate his survival between Resolve and just some favorable RNG, but the promotion helps a lot both between allowing him to take Savior and also just the extra bulk stats. We tend to get the impression that Haar is an invincible juggernaut in gross playthroughs, but this is really only true if he has some extra stats, whether it's just some extra bulk from level ups, or it's extra stats from transfer bonuses. Without those, he is definitely very vulnerable at times. Haar is going to be promoted at some point in part 3, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, but his base level in part 2 is only 11, and going into part 3, he was still just level 12. This puts him 9 levels away from a natural level 21 promotion, and between all of the other training goals that we currently have, and will later have to take on, it's going to take a lot of effort for Haar to reach level 21, hypothetically. So if we're going to spend a Master Crown to promote him, then we might as well do it ASAP to reap the benefits of his promoted stats for a longer period of time. We're about halfway through the chapter, and we've only talked about like 3 units thus far, and this is because Ike, Haar, and Ranulf are the only units that matter for the strategy. Everyone else is here either for self-improvement, or if they're literally doing nothing else, then they are just deployed to farm support points. This is one of the annoying aspects of this chapter, because even though it seems kind of complicated, it kind of gives me vibes of Chapter 1 Endgame, where you have multiple routes and you have to climb up like terrain disadvantage. The tools that we have in this chapter are much different than the ones that we had in 1 Endgame, and the strategy is overall way easier.
On our way to the top, we meet several NPC tigers and cats. They were fighting in the skirmish that was already going on in the story when we got here. In my runs, I've noticed that they tend to get in the way a lot, like they'll stand on a tile up on a ledge and I can't advance the way I want to. The AI in general can be very funny. They have a healing threshold, but no healer deployed, so instead they tend to run towards your healers. So sometimes I would find a kitty running up to my Mist or Reese, seemingly asking for pets, and often I just ignore them because I'm busy healing my own units. If it works out this way, it's beneficial, not just for all this, but also because they won't try to steal kills as much. If an NPC kills an enemy, the experience they would gain isn't completely lost. Instead, the game looks at how much experience the unit would get and converts it into bonus experience at a 1-to-1 ratio. When you try to turn your hard-earned bonus experience into actual experience, you'll notice it's a giant ripoff, as if you just try to convert Japanese yen into US dollars. We'd much rather feed the combat experience that these NPCs steal into the units we're training at the bottom of the map, those being Oscar, Titania, and Shinon. That's already made difficult by the uneven enemy distribution. There are almost no enemies to grind on near the starting point, and instead they're mostly concentrated at the top, and the units we have there don't care about experience gain at all.
Turn 3 enemy phase is ongoing, which means that shit's about to go down at the top of the map. There's only 2 configurations in which Haar and Ike can be positioned, based on the enemies that got in Haar's way and his advanced starting position on turn 1. So it's their skill and weapon loadouts that are intended to manipulate the enemy AI and maximize their chances to break through. Kind of like the drop that Haar did with Ike in 3-3 near the top right supply pile. Haar draws fire from the ranged enemies. This is because Ike has a shade skill instead of provoke, and he's banking on resolve to dodge potentially lethal hits, but also these enemies do a lot more damage to him, and it maximizes the chance that he's able to go into resolve range in the first place because he needs it offensively for turn 4 player phase. Meanwhile, Ike has to 1-round stuff up close, and the toughest enemy he has to 1-round is a general. He has to activate either Adept or get a crit with the Steel Sword Forge. Otherwise, everything else is either a clean 1-round or someone he doesn't need to kill. In the meantime, Ranulf is also going to get attacked and brought dangerously low on gauge over on his part of the map. He is like 2 combats away from detransforming, and if he were to get detransformed, he loses movement and wouldn't be able to make it to the arrive tile. He also gets brought down by a couple of heavy hits, but fortunately he's bulky enough and dodgy enough that realistically he's probably never going to die in this map.
To do a double seize, we have to remove the double boss. Haar takes care of the generic general by doubling him with the hammer, aided by resolve, and fortunately Ike's player phase action is available to remove the real boss. For Ike's boss kill, Donnon did the math on the Brave Sword versus the Steel Sword Crit Forge, and Brave Sword has the better odds. Ike 4-shots the boss with the Steel Crit Forge, so simply proccing Adept once isn't enough, he would need a crit or 2 Adepts. With the Brave Sword, his crit rate is a bit lower at 10%, but he gets many more attempts. Adept cannot proc on every single Brave Sword swing, but it can proc once every set of 2 swings. It helps that Ike is in best biorhythm to increase his Adept rate. This method is only possible because of how different this objective is from, say, 1-3's escape objective. We can't do what we did there by, for example, having Ranulf rescue Ike and arriving at the same time. The way it works is the first one to end their turn on one of the arrive tiles will trigger an event where they tell the other to get over there faster, and that allows the other to do the honors of seizing. After all is said and done, we just have to do a little bit more cleaning up. Oscar and Titania combine for a kill, Shinon gets another kill, and Oscar even manages to miss a coin that could be found at the bottom of the cliff. That's 3-4, completed in 4 turns.
Till next time.